Ma'am, you need to hang up the phone now.
But my grandson is in there. Please.
I understand, but you have to step back. It's not safe.
I can't just leave him. He's all I have.
Ma'am, you need to leave the area now.
I live here. I'm on the phone with my son.
I don't care. Get off the phone and move.
You can't do this. I have rights.
Rights won't help if you get hurt. Move.
Ma'am, put the phone down now.
No, my grandson's in trouble.
I said drop it. You're obstructing. Get off me. He's alone. Hands behind your back now. Help! Someone help!
They claimed she was a trespasser. They claimed the elderly Eleanor Caldwell was a threat to the neighborhood. But the body cam footage would eventually reveal a different reality. A retired principal dragged from her own porch by Officer Kendall Reese, a rookie prioritizing quotas over justice. Officer Kendall Reese thought her badge gave her the power to bully a defenseless grandmother. She did not know that the woman she handcuffed in front of her neighbors was not just a senior citizen. She was the mother of Commander Nolan Caldwell, a Navy SEAL leader actively training a hunter-killer team nearby. Officer Kendall Reese thought she was teaching a lesson in authority. She had no idea that before her shift ended, she would not just be losing her badge, she would be staring down the laser sights of the U.S. Navy's most lethal operators. This is the story of the arrest that turned a police precinct into a war zone. Sunlight filtered through the oak trees lining Elmwood Drive, casting dappled shadows across Eleanor Caldwell's front porch. She sat in her favorite wicker chair, the one with the faded blue cushion that had molded perfectly to her frame over the years. A cup of chamomile tea steamed gently on the small table beside her, next to a well-worn copy of Toni Morrison's Beloved and Still Finding New Layers. This was her usual ritual. After a long career of waking early to prepare lesson plans and counsel troubled students, retirement had gifted her these quiet mornings. No alarm clocks, no parent-teacher conferences, just her tea, and the words of writers who understood the weight of history. She turned a page, her reading glasses slipping slightly down her nose. The neighborhood was still waking up. She could hear the sprinkler system 3 houses down, the distant bark of the Ramirez family's golden retriever. Peace. She had earned this peace. The squad car appeared at the end of the block like a shark cutting through calm water. Eleanor noticed it immediately. With her sharp instincts honed from monitoring hallways, she sensed trouble. The black and white cruiser slowed as it approached, and she felt a familiar tightness in her chest. She had lived in this house for a long time, had paid off the mortgage early, knew every neighbor by name, but she also knew what she looked like sitting on this porch in this neighborhood. She knew what some people saw. The cruiser stopped directly in front of her house. Eleanor carefully marked her page and set the book down. She removed her reading glasses, folded them, and placed them on top of the book. Then she took a slow sip of her tea and waited. The officer who emerged was young, white, with blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun, jaw set in that particular way that Eleanor had seen 1,000 times in her career, the look of someone trying to prove something. The officer's hand rested on her belt as she approached, not quite on her weapon, but close enough to send a message. "Morning," Eleanor said evenly, her principal's voice still steady after all these years. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Reese." The woman stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, her eyes scanning Eleanor with undisguised suspicion. "We received a call about suspicious activity in this neighborhood." Eleanor's eyebrows rose slightly. "Suspicious activity? I was on my own porch." "Your porch." Officer Reese's tone sharpened. "Ma'am, do you have identification proving you live here?" "I do." Eleanor did not move. "May I ask what exactly was reported as suspicious?" "I'll ask the questions, ma'am." Officer Reese took a step up onto the porch. "I need to see your ID now." Eleanor felt the old familiar anger rising, the kind she had learned to swallow during a long career of making white parents comfortable, of proving her competence daily. But she was an elderly woman sitting on her own damn porch. "Officer Reese," she said slowly, "I'm happy to show you my identification, but I would like to understand why reading a book on my own property constitutes suspicious activity." "Ma'am, you are being uncooperative. I am being precise. There is a difference." Officer Reese's jaw tightened. "Stand up. I need to see your ID right now, or I am going to assume you are trespassing." "Trespassing?" Eleanor let the word hang in the air. She set down her teacup with deliberate care and stood slowly, her knees protesting slightly. She was short in her house slippers. Officer Reese towered over her. "My purse is inside. I will need to do not move." Officer Reese's hand went to her radio. "Dispatch, I have a possible trespasser refusing to identify, requesting backup." I said I would get my identification, Eleanor said, her voice rising slightly. It is inside my home. Your home? Officer Reese stepped closer, invading Eleanor's space. Ma'am, the homeowner of this property is listed as... She glanced at a notepad. Eleanor Caldwell. Are you claiming to be Eleanor Caldwell? I am not claiming anything. I am Eleanor Caldwell. I have lived here for a long time. Then you will not mind proving it. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. The words hit Eleanor like cold water. Excuse me, you are being detained for trespassing and failure to identify. Turn around now. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. Across the street, she saw Mrs. Ellison's curtains move. 2 houses down, Frank Rivera had stopped mowing his lawn. Witnesses? Good. Officer Reese, Eleanor said quietly, you are making a mistake. The only mistake, Officer Reese said, pulling out her handcuffs, is you thinking you can sit here and play games with me? Turn around, or I will turn you around. Eleanor looked into the young officer's eyes and saw something that made her blood run cold. Not hatred, not even anger, just absolute certainty. The certainty of someone who had already decided how this story would end. She thought of her son. She thought of the phone call she would make. Then she turned around. The metal bit into Eleanor's wrists like teeth. That is too tight, she said, her voice still controlled, still the voice that had once commanded auditoriums full of restless teenagers. Officer, these cuffs are cutting off my circulation. Officer Reese yanked the handcuffs tighter. They are fine. They were not fine. Eleanor could already feel her fingers beginning to tingle, the cold steel digging into the thin skin of her wrists. She had had carpal tunnel surgery years earlier. The scar tissue was still sensitive, but she knew better than to say that now. She knew that any complaint would be labeled as resistance. Ma'am, you need to step off that porch. Officer Reese's hand pressed against Eleanor's shoulder blade, pushing her forward. Eleanor's house slippers scraped against the wooden planks. She had built this porch with her late husband. They had spent a whole summer on it, him measuring and cutting, her painting each board a soft gray. She had imagined growing old here, watching grandchildren play in the yard. She had never imagined being marched off it in handcuffs. Wait, my shoes. At least let me get proper shoes. You should have thought of that before you decided to trespass. This is my house. The words burst out of Eleanor before she could stop them, louder than she had intended. Across the street, more curtains moved. Frank Rivera had abandoned his lawnmower entirely and was walking toward them. Hey! Frank called out, his voice carrying across the manicured lawns. Hey, what is going on? That is Mrs. Caldwell. Officer Reese's head snapped toward him. Sir, step back. This is police business. Police business. She lives there. I have known her for years. Frank was at the edge of Eleanor's lawn now, his face flushed with confusion and anger. Mrs. Caldwell, what is happening? Sir, I will not tell you again. Step back, or you will be arrested for interfering with an officer. Interfering? I am telling you that you have got the wrong person. It is okay. Eleanor's voice cut through the rising tension. She could not let her neighbors get hurt trying to defend her. She knew how this worked. She had seen the news. Frank, please, just call my son. His number is on the emergency contact list from the neighborhood association. Call Nolan. I am calling him right now, Frank said, already pulling out his phone. This is insane, officer. You are making a huge mistake. Officer Reese ignored him, shoving Eleanor forward. The porch steps were steep, and with her hands cuffed behind her back, Eleanor could not catch herself if she stumbled. She took them slowly, carefully, her slippers offering no traction. On the third step, her foot slipped. She pitched forward, her center of gravity gone, nothing to grab onto. For a terrifying moment, she was falling. An elderly woman with brittle bones in a concrete walkway rushing up to meet her face. Officer Reese caught her arm, not gently, but enough to keep her upright. Watch your step. The casual cruelty of it took Eleanor's breath away. This woman had created the danger and then acted as if Eleanor was clumsy. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. Instead, she steadied herself and kept walking. More neighbors were emerging now. Mrs. Ellison from across the street, still in her bathrobe. The Ramirez family and their golden retriever barking frantically at the end of its leash. Young Tyler Morgan, home from college, his phone out and recording. You all are seeing this, right? Tyler called out. Everybody record this, Mrs. Caldwell. We are recording everything. Put those phones away. Officer Reese barked, but she did not stop moving Eleanor toward the squad car. This is an active arrest. You are interfering with. We are on public property. Mrs. Ellison said, her voice shaking but defiant. We have every right to film. Eleanor, honey, we are calling everyone. We are calling the mayor's office. We are calling. Call my son. Eleanor repeated louder this time. Please, just call Nolan. Officer Reese opened the back door of the squad car with one hand, the other still gripping Eleanor's arm. The interior smelled like disinfectant and fear. Eleanor had never been in a police car in her life. She had raised her son to respect authority, to follow the rules, to be twice as good, to get half as far. And here she was. Duck your head, Officer Reese said. Eleanor did not move fast enough. Officer Reese's hand came down on top of her head, pushing her down and forward, not guiding, pushing. Eleanor's knee cracked against the doorframe and pain shot up her leg. Ow, you are hurting me. Should have moved faster. Officer Reese shoved her into the back seat. Eleanor landed awkwardly, her cuffed hands trapped beneath her, her shoulders slamming into the opposite door. The pain in her wrists was excruciating now, a hot burning sensation that radiated up her forearms. She tried to shift her weight to relieve the pressure, but the space was too small and her hands were trapped. The door slammed shut. Through the window, Eleanor could see her neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, their faces a mixture of shock and fury. She could see her porch, her tea still steaming on the table, her book waiting to be finished. She could see her home. Officer Reese slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. You people, she muttered just loud enough for Eleanor to hear, always think the rules do not apply to you. Eleanor closed her eyes and thought of her son, Nolan, who had joined the Navy at 18. Nolan, who had become something she was not supposed to talk about, something classified. Nolan, who called her regularly without fail. He would be expecting her call. The fluorescent lights in the precinct hummed with a frequency that made Eleanor's head ache. Or maybe that was from being shoved into the car or from the handcuffs that had been cutting off her circulation. Her hands had gone from tingling to numb, and she could not feel her fingertips anymore. Officer Reese hauled her through the station like a trophy, past desks, where other officers looked up with mild interest before returning to their paperwork. No one asked questions. No one seemed to find anything unusual about an elderly woman in house slippers being dragged through the building. The processing room was exactly what Eleanor had seen in movies. Cinder block walls painted an institutional beige, a metal table bolted to the floor, cameras in the corners with blinking red lights cold. But everything was cold. The air conditioning was set too high, and Eleanor's thin cardigan did nothing against it. Sit. Officer Reese pointed to a metal chair. Eleanor sat, her hands still cuffed behind her back. The position forced her shoulders forward at an unnatural angle. She had had rotator cuff problems for years. This was agony. Officer Reese, she said quietly, I need these cuffs removed, or at least moved to the front. I have a medical condition. Everyone has a medical condition. Officer Reese pulled out a form and clicked her pen with theatrical boredom. Let us start with the basics. Name? You know my name? Eleanor Caldwell. The same name on the deed to the house you arrested me in front of. Uncooperative suspect refuses to identify. Officer Reese wrote something on the form. We will process you as a Jane Doe until you decide to cooperate. Eleanor stared at her. You cannot be serious. Do I look like I am joking? Officer Reese leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. You had multiple chances to identify yourself properly. You chose to be difficult. Now we do this the hard way. I told you my name. I told you I lived there. I offered to show you identification. After you resisted, I did not resist anything. I asked you a question. Questioning an officer's authority is resistance. Officer Reese's smile was thin and cold. You people always think you can talk your way out of everything. Always think you are smarter than everyone else. The words hung in the air between them. You people. Eleanor had heard those words before in 1,000 different contexts from 1,000 different mouths, but hearing them here in this room from someone with a badge and a gun made them feel like a physical blow. I was a school principal for a long time, Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. I have a master's degree in education. I have never been arrested. I have never even had a speeding ticket. And you are processing me as a Jane Doe because I asked why reading on my own porch was suspicious. Jane Doe, approximately elderly, black female. Officer Reese continued writing as if Eleanor had not spoken. Arrested for trespassing, failure to identify, and resisting arrest. I did not resist. You refused to comply with a lawful order. I asked for clarification, raising your voice to an officer. That is going in the report, too. Officer Reese set down her pen and stood up. Well, you are going to sit here and think about your choices. When you are ready to cooperate, maybe we will talk about that phone call you keep asking for. I have a right to a phone call. Eleanor's principal voice was back, the one that had made vice principals straighten their spines and troublemakers reconsider their life choices. That is not a privilege you grant. That is a constitutional right. Constitutional rights. Officer Reese laughed. Actually laughed. You know what is funny? People like you love to talk about rights. But when it comes to respecting authority, following simple instructions, suddenly all those rights are more important than basic compliance. People like me. Eleanor repeated the words slowly. Say what you mean, Officer Reese. Their eyes met. For a moment, something flickered across Officer Reese's face. Not shame exactly, but awareness. The awareness that she had said the quiet part out loud. Then it was gone, replaced by that same cold certainty. I mean, people who think they are above the law. Officer Reese walked to the door. I will be back in a little while. Maybe by then you will remember your name. My name is Eleanor Caldwell. My address is on Elmwood Drive. My son's name is Commander Nolan Caldwell, United States Navy, and I want my phone call now. Officer Reese paused at the door. Commander, sure he is. And I am the Queen of England. She glanced back at Eleanor with something like pity. You know what is sad? You actually believe someone is coming to save you. Nobody is coming, Jane Doe. Nobody cares. The door closed with a heavy click. Eleanor sat alone in the cold room, her hands numb, her shoulders screaming, her knee throbbing where it had hit the car door. The camera in the corner blinked its red eye at her, recording everything. She thought about Nolan, about the last time she had seen him when he had come home on leave. He had been different, harder, quieter, with eyes that saw threats everywhere. He had checked the locks on her doors multiple times. He had asked about her neighbors, about whether she felt safe. Mom, he had said, if anything ever happens, anything at all, you call me. I do not care what time it is. I do not care where I am. You call me first. She had laughed it off then. What could possibly happen in her quiet neighborhood? Now she knew. The door opened again. A different officer this time, older with sergeant stripes. He looked tired. Ma'am, he said, not unkindly. You get one phone call. Make it count. Eleanor's voice did not shake. I only need one. The briefing room at Naval Special Warfare Development Group was exactly what civilians imagined when they thought of elite military operations. Stark, windowless, filled with screens displaying satellite imagery and tactical overlays. Commander Nolan Caldwell stood at the front, a laser pointer in his hand, walking his team through the finer points of close quarters battle in urban environments. The fatal funnel, he said, circling a doorway on the projected blueprint, is where most operators get killed. You stack, you flow, you clear. No hesitation. Hesitation gets your swim buddy killed. Questions? His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. During briefings, the phone stayed silent unless it was an emergency. It buzzed again, then again. Lieutenant Bryce Coleman raised his hand. Commander, are you going to get that? Nolan pulled out his phone, ready to silence it. Multiple missed calls. 3 from numbers he did not recognize. 4 from Frank Rivera, his mother's neighbor. His stomach dropped. Take 5, he said, his voice already changing, the casual instructor tone evaporating. He stepped into the hallway and called Frank back. Frank answered on the first ring. Nolan, thank God it is your mom. The police arrested her right off her own porch, man. I tried to tell them, but the rest of Frank's words became white noise. Nolan's vision narrowed. His breathing slowed. Every sense sharpened. It was the same physiological response he had when bullets started flying, when missions went sideways, when the world divided into threats and targets. Say that again slowly. Frank's voice shook as he recounted it. The cop, the handcuffs, the way his mother had been shoved into the car, the way she had asked for Nolan, specifically asked for him, told them to call him. What precinct? Nolan's voice was flat now, emotionless. The voice his team knew meant someone was about to have a very bad day. The Oak Ridge station on Main Street. Nolan, they would not listen. I told them she lived there. Mrs. Ellison told them. Even young Tyler was recording, and the cop did not care. She just, I need you to do something for me, Frank. Nolan was already walking back toward the briefing room. I need you to call that precinct every few minutes. Ask about Eleanor Caldwell. Make them say her name. Make them acknowledge she is there. Can you do that? Yeah, I can do that. Nolan, your mom, she did not do anything wrong. She was just reading. She was just sitting there reading. I know. Nolan ended the call. He stood outside the briefing room for a few seconds. In those seconds, he made a series of calculations. Distance to the Oak Ridge station, assets available, his entire hunter-killer team currently in the building, legal authority murky, but he would figure it out. Consequences potentially career-ending. His mother handcuffed, his mother who had raised him alone after his father died, his mother who had worked 2 jobs to keep him in good schools, his mother who had never asked him for anything except to call regularly and stay safe. The calculations took seconds. The decision took less than 1. Nolan walked back into the briefing room as 8 of the most lethal operators in the United States military looked up at him. They had worked together for years. They knew each other's tales, each other's limits, each other's demons, and they all recognized the look on Nolan's face. Lieutenant Bryce Coleman sat up straighter. Commander, gear up, full tactical, we roll in 5. No one moved. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Torres spoke carefully. Sir, what is the target? The Oak Ridge Police Precinct. The room went silent. Then everyone started talking at once. A police station. Commander, what? Sir, we cannot just... Nolan's voice cut through the noise like a blade. My mother was arrested in her own home by a cop on a power trip. She is elderly. She has been in custody. She asked for me. He paused, his jaw tight. I am going to get her. You are either with me or you are not. Decide now. Chief Petty Officer Torres stood up first. I am in. Lieutenant Bryce Coleman was next. Let us go get Mama Caldwell. One by one they rose, all 8 of them. Petty Officer David Jackson, the team's breacher. Petty Officer Kevin Williams, their communications specialist. Petty Officer Jamal Thompson, their medic. Every single one of them had met Eleanor. She had sent care packages. She had written letters. She had called them her boys and asked about their families and remembered their birthdays. This is going to end careers, Nolan said quietly. Mine definitely. Maybe yours. I need you to understand that. With respect, Commander, Chief Petty Officer Torres said, our careers, nobody puts hands on Mama Caldwell. The others nodded. No hesitation. Nolan felt something crack in his chest. Gratitude, loyalty, but love for these men who would follow him into hell. Non-lethal only. We are not at war with cops. We are extracting a civilian from unlawful detention. Rules of engagement, minimum necessary force. We go in, we get my mother. We secure evidence of misconduct. We get out clean and surgical. What about command? Lieutenant Bryce Coleman asked. We need authorization. I will handle command. Nolan was already moving toward the armory. Right now, we have a short window before anyone realizes we are gone. Plate carriers, sidearms, less lethal options. Williams, I need you to tap into the precinct security system. I want eyes inside before we arrive. Jackson, you are on the door. Torres, you are with me on entry. Everyone else, perimeter and overwatch. They moved like water, flowing out of the briefing room toward the armory. But Nolan pulled out his phone and dialed a number he had hoped he would never have to use. Captain Reynolds answered on the second ring. Caldwell, this better be good. Sir, I am about to do something that is either going to make sense in hindsight or end my career. My mother was falsely arrested. I am extracting her from the Oak Ridge PD. I am informing you as a courtesy, not asking permission. Silence on the other end. Then your mother. Eleanor? Yes, sir. More silence. Captain Reynolds had met Eleanor at a Navy function years earlier. She had charmed him, asked about his grandchildren, made him laugh. How long until you are on site? Not long. You have a brief window before I have to report this. Make it count. And Caldwell, do not make me regret this. No, sir. Nolan hung up and grabbed his gear. His hands were steady. His mind was clear. This was just another mission. Extract a high-value target from hostile territory. He had done it many times, except this time the target was his mother. And God help anyone who got in his way. Officer Kendall Reese was filling out paperwork when the lights flickered. She looked up from her desk, annoyed. The Oak Ridge precinct was old, built years earlier, and the electrical system had issues, but the lights steadied, and she went back to her report. She was deep into her creative writing exercise, describing how the belligerent suspect had aggressively refused to comply when dispatch called out, "Hey Reese, you got like 6 calls asking about your Jane Doe." Some guy named Rivera will not stop calling. Kendall smiled. Good. Let them call. Let them waste their time. By the time anyone figured out what was happening, she would have her arrest quota met and a commendation for handling a difficult suspect. She had been on the force for some time, and she was tired of being treated like a rookie. This arrest would show them she could handle herself. She glanced at the clock. The old woman had been in holding for a while now. Let her sit a little longer. Let her think about respect. The front desk phone rang. Sergeant Klein answered it, listened for a moment, then frowned. Yeah, this is Oak Ridge PD. Who is calling? His frown deepened. Naval Special Warfare Command. Is this a prank? Kendall's pen paused mid-sentence. No, I am not transferring you to anyone until you tell me what this is about, Klein said, his voice irritated. A detainee. We have lots of detainees. You need to be more specific. He listened, then laughed. A Navy SEAL's mother. Lady, I do not know what you are trying to pull, but hello. Hello. He stared at the phone. She hung up. Probably a prank, Kendall said, but something cold touched the base of her spine. The old woman had said her son was a commander. Onmeirai. Kendall had assumed she was lying. Old people lied all the time, made up stories to make themselves sound important. Weird, though, Klein muttered. He tried to call back, but the line was dead. He jiggled the receiver. Phone is out. Use your cell. Klein pulled out his phone and stared at it. No signal. That is strange. I had full bars a minute ago. Kendall checked her own phone. No signal, no data, nothing. Around the precinct, other officers were checking their phones. Confusion rippling through the building. The radio on Klein's desk crackled with static, then went silent. What the hell? Klein smacked the radio. Nothing. Kendall stood up, her instincts finally catching up to her situation. Something was wrong, the phones and the radios, the cell service, all at once. That did not just happen. She walked to the front window and looked out at the parking lot. There were vehicles she did not recognize. A black SUV with tinted windows parked across the street. A panel van near the corner, unmarked, its engine running. And was that? She squinted. Was that someone on the roof of the building across the street? Klein, do we have any operations going on tonight? Any task force stuff? Not that I know of. Why? There are vehicles outside, lots of them. Klein joined her at the window. More officers gathered behind them. The black SUV's windows were so dark they looked like voids. No license plate on the front. The panel van's side door was open just a crack, and Kendall could swear she saw movement inside. Maybe it is a federal thing. Officer Dorson suggested DEA or FBI. They would tell us if they were running an op in our jurisdiction, Klein said, but he did not sound certain. The lights flickered again. This time they stayed dim for a few seconds before coming back to full brightness. Kendall's heart was beating faster now. She thought about the old woman in holding, about her calm voice when she had said her son's name, Commander Nolan Caldwell, United States Navy. Kendall had laughed at her, had called her a liar. What if she was not lying? I am calling the chief, Klein said, reaching for his desk phone. Dead. He tried to cell again. Still no signal. This is ridiculous. Dorson, go check the server room, see if something is wrong with our systems. Dorson headed down the hallway. Kendall watched the vehicles outside. More had arrived. She counted several now as they had formed a loose perimeter around the building, not obvious enough to cause alarm, but positioned with clear sight lines to every exit. This was tactical. This was planned. Klein, she said quietly, I think we should move the detainees to secure holding. Why? What is going on? I do not know, but something is not right. Dorson came running back from the server room, his face pale. Sarge, our entire network is down. Internet, everything. And the backup generator just kicked on. The backup, we did not lose main power. I know it just turned on by itself. The lights went out. Not flickering this time, completely out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the precinct in dim red. The backup generator hummed somewhere in the building's guts. Kendall's hand went to her service weapon. Around her, other officers were doing the same, their casual confusion transforming into alert tension. Everyone stay calm, Klein said. But his voice had lost its authority. It is probably just a power surge. The grid has been unstable. Kendall did not believe that. Neither did anyone else. Through the window, she could see the streetlights were still on. The traffic signal at the corner was working fine. Every building around them had power. Just the precinct was dark. This is targeted, Kendall whispered. What? This is a targeted attack. Someone cut our power. Someone killed our communications. She turned to Klein, and for the first time since she had pinned on her badge, she felt genuine fear. We need to call for backup with what? The phones are dead. The radios are dead. My cell service is jammed. Then someone needs to drive to the next precinct. And the front door's electronic lock clicked once, twice, 3 times, like someone was testing it remotely. Every officer in the room drew their weapon. Kendall's mouth was dry. She thought about the old woman again, about the way she had looked at Kendall with something like pity, about her last words before Kendall had left her in that cold room. Nobody is coming, Kendall had said. She had a terrible feeling she had been wrong. Outside, in the darkness between the streetlights, red dots appeared. Dozens of them, laser sights painting the precinct's walls like a constellation of threats. Oh God, someone whispered. Kendall Reese finally understood. The old woman had not been lying. Someone was coming, and they were already here. The flashbang came through the window with surgical precision. Kendall Reese had a split second to register the cylindrical object arcing through the air before her world exploded into white light and deafening sound. The concussive blast hit her like a physical wall, and she stumbled backward, her hands flying to her ears too late. Her vision was nothing but burning after images. Her equilibrium was gone. She could not tell up from down. Around her, officers were shouting, but the words were muffled, distant, like she was underwater. Someone fired their weapon. She felt the muzzle flash more than saw it. And then Sergeant Klein was screaming, "Cease fire! Cease fire!" But his voice sounded like it was coming from the end of a long tunnel. The front door blew open, not with explosives, with a breaching tool that took the lock apart in seconds. The door swung wide and smoke poured in. No, not smoke. Some kind of obscurant, thick and gray, and impossible to see through. Kendall's eyes were streaming. She tried to raise her weapon, but her hands were shaking so badly she could not find the target. Shapes moved through the smoke fast, impossibly fast. They flowed like water, like shadows, like nothing human should move. Kendall saw the outline of a figure, raised her gun, and then something struck her wrist with precise force. Her weapon clattered to the floor. Before she could react, her arm was twisted behind her back, and she was face down on the ground, a knee pressing between her shoulder blades. "Do not move." The voice was calm, professional, utterly devoid of emotion. "Hands behind your head. Do it now." Kendall complied. She had no choice. Whatever was happening, we'll be fine. Whoever these people were, they were so far beyond her training that resistance was meaningless. All around the precinct, the same scene was playing out. Officers were being disarmed and secured with zip ties, their weapons collected and cleared with mechanical efficiency. No one was hurt. No one was even roughed up. But within moments of the breach, every officer in the building was on the ground, hands secured while figures in full tactical gear moved through the precinct like they owned it. Kendall's vision was starting to clear. She could make out details now. The man standing over her wore a plate carrier with no identifying patches. Night vision goggles pushed up on his helmet, a sidearm on his thigh. He was not SWAT. SWAT did not move like this. SWAT did not have this kind of equipment. "Building secure," someone said into a radio. "No casualties. All subjects detained." Through the smoke and her watering eyes, Kendall saw a figure enter through the front door, taller than the others, moving with absolute authority. The other operators stepped aside for him, creating a path. Commander Nolan Caldwell walked through his mother's precinct like an avenging angel. He had removed his helmet. His face was carved from stone, his eyes scanning the room with the cold assessment of a predator evaluating prey. He looked at each officer on the ground, his gaze lingering on their faces, memorizing them. When his eyes found Kendall, she felt her bladder nearly let go. She had seen anger before. She had seen rage. This was neither. This was something colder, something final. "Where is she?" His voice carried through the room despite being barely above conversational volume. No one answered. Kendall could not have spoken if she had wanted to. Her throat was closed with fear. "I am going to ask one more time." Nolan's hand rested on his sidearm. "Where is Eleanor Caldwell?" "Holding." Sergeant Klein croaked from somewhere to Kendall's left. "She is in holding cell 3. Please, we did not." But Nolan was already moving, his team flowing with him. 2 operators stayed behind to watch the detained officers. The rest followed their commander deeper into the precinct. Kendall heard a door being opened, then another. Then she heard a voice that made her stomach drop. "Nolan, baby, is that you?" I am here, Mom. I am here. The tenderness in his voice was somehow more terrifying than the cold fury had been. This man had just led a military assault on a police station, had disabled their communications, had breached their building, and had disarmed a dozen officers without firing a shot. And now he was calling someone Mom in the voice of a worried son. Footsteps approached. Kendall turned her head as much as she could, with her face pressed to the floor, and saw them. Eleanor Caldwell was walking slowly, supported by her son's arm. She was still in her house slippers. Her wrists were raw and swollen where the handcuffs had been. She moved like she was in pain, favoring her right leg, but her head was high, her spine straight, every inch the educator she had been for decades. Behind her, Nolan Caldwell looked like death itself. A medic, one of the operators, was checking Eleanor's wrists, speaking quietly to her. She nodded, answered his questions, let him examine her injuries. Nolan stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder, his eyes never leaving the officers on the ground. "Which one?" he asked his mother, his voice still soft. Eleanor's eyes found Kendall. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Kendall wanted to apologize, wanted to explain, wanted to say something that would make this better, but there was nothing to say. She had done this. She had created this situation. She had put her hands on this woman, had mocked her, had processed her as a Jane Doe, had left her handcuffed in a cold room. "Her," Eleanor said quietly. "Officer Reese." Nolan walked over to where Kendall lay on the ground. He crouched down, bringing his face level with hers. Up close, she could see the resemblance. The same high cheekbones, the same intelligent eyes. But where Eleanor's eyes held disappointment, Nolan held something that made Kendall's blood run cold. "My mother," he said conversationally, "is elderly. She has arthritis in her hands. She had carpal tunnel surgery years earlier. The handcuffs you put on her were tight enough to cut off circulation. She is going to have nerve damage. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" Kendall's voice came out as a whisper. "I did not know. You did not ask." Nolan stood up. "You did not care. You saw an elderly black woman in a nice neighborhood and decided she did not belong. You did not check her ID. You did not verify ownership of the property. You just decided, I was doing my job. Your job." Nolan's laugh was bitter. "Chief Petty Officer Torres, what is the status on the precinct's body cam footage? Downloaded and secured." "Commander," one of the operators called back. "We have also got the booking records, the arrest report, and the Jane Doe processing paperwork, all backed up to our secure server." "Good. Make sure copies go to the State Police, the FBI Civil Rights Division, and the ACLU. I want everyone to see exactly how Officer Reese does her job." Kendall felt the last of her hope die. The body cam footage, the footage that would show everything, her lies, her cruelty, the way she had mocked Eleanor, the way she had shoved her into the car. "Mom," Nolan said, turning back to his mother, "are you ready to go home?" "Almost." Eleanor walked slowly toward Kendall. She moved carefully, painfully, and Kendall realized with shame that she had caused that pain. When Eleanor spoke, her voice was sad. "I taught children for a long time. Officer Reese, do you know what I learned? That cruelty is a choice. Every single time you chose this." Then she turned and let her son lead her out of the precinct, through the smoke and the chaos and the armed operators out into the night where she belonged. Kendall Reese lay on the floor of her precinct, zip-tied and disarmed, and finally understood the magnitude of her mistake. Police Chief Raymond Ellis arrived at the precinct to find his building surrounded by unmarked vehicles and his officers zip-tied on the floor. He had been at a city council dinner when the call came through on his personal cell. The precinct's communications were down. Something was happening. Get here now. He had driven fast, his mind racing through possibilities. A terrorist attack, an active shooter, a prison break. He had not imagined this. What in the hell is going on here? Ellis stood in the doorway of his own precinct, staring at the armed figures in tactical gear. "Who is in charge? Identify yourselves immediately." One of the operators stepped forward. "Chief Ellis, I am Chief Petty Officer Torres, United States Naval Special Warfare Command. You need to stand down, sir. Stand down. This is my precinct. You have no authority here." Ellis reached for his sidearm. 3 laser sights appeared on his chest instantly. "Sir, I strongly advise you to remove your hand from your weapon." Torres's voice remained calm. "We are not here to hurt anyone, but we will defend ourselves if necessary." Ellis slowly moved his hand away from his gun. His face was purple with rage and confusion. "This is American soil. You cannot just storm a police station. I do not care what branch of the military you are from." "Actually, Chief, we can." Nolan Caldwell emerged from the holding area, his mother on his arm. Under Title 10, Section 382 of the U.S. Code, military personnel can be deployed to assist law enforcement or in cases of civil rights violations to investigate and secure evidence of federal crimes. Your officer arrested a civilian without cause, falsified arrest records, and denied her constitutional rights. That makes this precinct a crime scene, and I am securing it. Ellis stared at Eleanor, then at Nolan, then back at Eleanor. Mrs. Caldwell, what are you doing here? Why are you? His eyes widened as understanding dawned. Oh no. Oh Jesus. Reese, what did you do? Kendall Reese was still on the floor, but she had managed to sit up. Chief, I arrested a trespasser. I followed protocol. She arrested me on my own property, Eleanor said quietly. She refused to let me show identification. She handcuffed me so tightly I have lost feeling in my fingers. She processed me as a Jane Doe and mocked me when I told her my son was in the Navy. Ellis closed his eyes. Officer Reese, please tell me you verified the property ownership before making the arrest. Silence. Please tell me you at least checked her ID. More silence. She would not show it. Kendall finally said, her voice defensive. She was being uncooperative. I asked why reading on my porch was suspicious. Eleanor corrected. That is not being uncooperative. That is asking a reasonable question. Nolan's jaw tightened. Chief Ellis, I need you to understand something. My mother is an elderly retired educator with no criminal record. She was arrested for existing while black in her own neighborhood. Your officer saw an elderly woman in a nice area and assumed she was a criminal. Then she doubled down. She falsified reports. She denied my mother medical attention. She processed her as a Jane Doe to avoid accountability. Commander Caldwell, I understand you are upset, but this is still a civilian matter. It stopped being a civilian matter when your officer violated my mother's civil rights. That is a federal crime, which means I have every legal right to secure this scene and all evidence related to it. Nolan's voice was firm. My team has already downloaded your body cam footage, your booking records, and your arrest reports. We found something interesting, Chief. Want to know what it is? Ellis said nothing. Officer Reese has made numerous arrests. Most of them were people of color. Many of those arrests were later dismissed due to lack of evidence or procedural violations. But she keeps making arrests because you have a quota system, do you not? Officers get evaluated on their numbers. And Reese here has been padding her stats by targeting people she thinks will not fight back. That is not. We do not have quotas. You have performance metrics tied to arrest numbers. Do not insult my intelligence by pretending there is a difference. Nolan gestured to one of his operators. Lieutenant Bryce Coleman. What else did we find? Coleman consulted a tablet. Officer Reese has had multiple complaints filed against her, all from minority citizens, all dismissed by internal affairs without investigation. She has also been involved in several use of force incidents, some of which resulted in injuries to suspects later found to be innocent. Kendall Reese suddenly lunged to her feet. You have no right to access those files. That is confidential personnel information. Her hand went to her weapon. She never cleared the holster. Petty Officer Jackson moved like lightning, his hand clamping down on Kendall's wrist before her fingers even touched the grip. In one fluid motion, he twisted her arm, removed her weapon, and had her back on the ground, this time face down with his knee on her back. That, Nolan said coldly, was the stupidest thing you could have done. You just attempted to draw a weapon on a federal operator during an active investigation. Chief Petty Officer Torres had assault on a federal agent to her charges. Noted, Commander. Kendall was crying now, her face pressed against the floor, her career disintegrating around her. I was just doing my job. I was just trying to. You were trying to meet your quota. Nolan cut her off. You saw an easy target and you took it. You did not care about justice. You did not care about the law. You cared about your numbers. He turned back to Ellis. Chief, here is what is going to happen. The state police are en route. They will be taking custody of Officer Reese and conducting a full investigation into your department's practices. The FBI's Civil Rights Division will be reviewing every arrest Reese has made. And my mother will be filing a federal lawsuit against this department, against Officer Reese personally, and against you for failing to supervise your officers. Commander, please, I am not finished. Nolan's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper, but it carried through the room like thunder. You are going to personally apologize to my mother. You are going to mean it. And then you are going to pray that she is a more forgiving person than I am, because if it were up to me, this entire department would be under federal oversight by morning. Ellis looked at Eleanor, really looked at her, saw the swollen wrists, the house slippers, the way she held herself despite the pain. Saw a grandmother who had been brutalized by someone sworn to protect her. Mrs. Caldwell, he said, his voice breaking, I am so deeply sorry. There is no excuse for what happened to you. None. Eleanor nodded slowly. See that it does not happen to anyone else. Outside, sirens approached, the state police arriving to clean up the mess. Nolan's team began preparing to extract. Mission complete. Kendall Reese lay on the floor and watched her life end, one decision at a time. The courtroom was packed. Every seat in the gallery was filled with faces that Kendall Reese recognized from her arrest reports. The elderly Korean man she had detained for loitering outside his own dry cleaning business. The black teenager she had stopped for, matching a description that turned out to be completely fabricated. The Hispanic grandmother she had cited for disturbing the peace when she had been speaking Spanish to her grandchildren in a park. They were all here watching her with expressions that ranged from satisfaction to something that looked almost like pity. Kendall sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, her hands folded in front of her. Her public defender, overworked and underpaid, shuffled through papers with the resigned air of someone who knew they were fighting a losing battle. The evidence was overwhelming. The body cam footage alone was damning enough. But then the FBI had gotten involved. They had found everything. Federal prosecutor Sofia Ramirez stood before the jury with the confidence of someone holding a royal flush. She was young, sharp, and had built her career on civil rights cases. This one was going to make her famous. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she began. Over the next few days, you are going to see something that should shock you. You are going to see a pattern of abuse so clear, so documented, that the only question you will have is how it was allowed to continue for so long. The first video played on the screen, Kendall's body cam footage from months earlier, an elderly white-haired man, Mr. Park, standing outside his business early in the morning. Kendall's voice, aggressive and accusatory. What are you doing here? This business is not open yet. Are you trying to break in? Mr. Park's confused response. This is my store. I own this store. Sure you do. Let me see some ID. The footage showed Kendall running his identification, finding nothing and still detaining him while she verified his story. Mr. Park had been elderly. He had owned that dry cleaner for a long time. The jury watched in silence. The second video was worse. A teenage boy, Marcus Williams, walking home from basketball practice. Kendall pulling up beside him, ordering him to stop. You matched the description of a suspect in a robbery. What robbery? I was just at practice. Turn around. Hands on the car. The boy complied. Kendall searched him roughly, finding nothing but a phone and a wallet. She kept him there while calling for backup, treating him like a dangerous criminal. The body cam caught her radio call. Yeah, he is clean, but he has got an attitude. Thought about bringing him in for obstruction. The dispatcher's response. What did he obstruct? Just never mind. Marcus Williams was in the courtroom now, sitting in the front row. He had been younger when Kendall had humiliated him in front of his neighbors. Video after video played. Each one showed the same pattern. Kendall targeting people of color, elderly citizens, anyone she perceived as vulnerable or unlikely to fight back. Each encounter escalated unnecessarily. Each arrest report was filled with lies, aggressive behavior, failure to comply, suspicious activity. Then they showed Eleanor's footage. The courtroom went silent as they watched Kendall drag an elderly woman off her own porch, watched her tighten the handcuffs despite Eleanor's calm request to loosen them, watched her shove Eleanor into the car, causing her to hit her knee, heard her mutter, "You people," under her breath. In the gallery, someone gasped. Kendall could not look up. She stared at her hands and felt the weight of every eye in the room. The defense would have you believe, Prosecutor Ramirez continued, that Officer Reese was simply doing her job, that these were legitimate arrests based on reasonable suspicion. But the evidence tells a different story. Of the arrests Officer Reese made, the vast majority were people of color. Many were later dismissed. She targeted the vulnerable. She falsified reports, and when confronted with her actions, she showed no remorse. Kendall's lawyer stood up, his objection weak. Your Honor, my client was following department protocol. Protocol? Judge Denise Vargas, a black woman who had been on the bench for years, looked at him over her glasses. Counselor, I have reviewed the Oak Ridge PD's protocols. Nowhere does it say officers should arrest people for reading on their own porches. Sit down. The trial concluded. The jury deliberated and reached a verdict, guilty on all counts. Deprivation of rights under color of law, false arrest, filing false reports, assault under color of authority. Kendall stood for sentencing with tears streaming down her face. Her lawyer made a plea for leniency. She was young. She had made mistakes. She could learn from this. Judge Vargas was unmoved. "Miss Reese," she said, her voice carrying the weight of decades of witnessing injustice, "you were given a badge and a gun in the public's trust. You used that power to terrorize people who reminded you of your own prejudices. You targeted the elderly, the vulnerable, people who looked different from you. You falsified reports to cover your tracks. And when you were caught, you showed no remorse." Kendall opened her mouth to speak, but the judge held up a hand. "I have seen the footage of you processing Mrs. Caldwell as a Jane Doe. I have heard you mock her when she told you her son was a Navy commander. You laughed at her. You thought she was powerless. You thought no one would care about one more elderly black woman being humiliated by police." Judge Vargas leaned forward. "You were wrong, but now you are going to pay for that mistake." The sentence came down like a hammer. 10 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole for the first several years. Permanent ban from law enforcement, restitution to be paid to all victims. Kendall's legs gave out. Her lawyer caught her as she collapsed, sobbing. In the gallery, some people cheered, others simply nodded, satisfied that justice had finally been served. Eleanor Caldwell sat in the front row, her son beside her. She did not cheer. She did not smile. She just watched as Kendall Reese was led away in handcuffs, the same handcuffs Kendall had used on her. As the courtroom emptied, Nolan turned to his mother. "How do you feel?" Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. "Sad," she finally said. "I feel sad that it came to this, that she could not see people as people until it was too late. She does not deserve your sympathy, Mom." "I know." Eleanor stood slowly, her wrists still wrapped in bandages. "But I am not doing this for her. I am doing it for me. Bitterness is a poison, baby. I will not let her take anything else from me." They walked out of the courthouse together, into the sunlight, into freedom. Behind them, Kendall Reese began her journey into darkness, finally understanding what it meant to be powerless. Deep into her sentence, Kendall Reese had learned what it meant to be invisible. The other inmates did not bother her much anymore. In the beginning, they had tested her. A former cop in prison was always a target, but Kendall had nothing left to fight with, no pride left to defend. She had taken her beatings quietly, done her work assignments without complaint, and eventually faded into the background of prison life. Just another number, just another body moving through the system she had once fed with her arrests. She worked in the prison library now, shelving books and processing requests. It was quiet work, solitary, which suited her fine. She did not want to talk to anyone, did not want to explain herself or hear their stories or pretend she was anything other than what she was. A person who destroyed lives because she could. The letter arrived one day. Mail call was the highlight of most inmates' days, but Kendall rarely got anything. Her parents had stopped writing after some time. Her ex-husband had made it clear he wanted nothing to do with her. She had no friends left on the outside. So, when the guard called her name and handed her an envelope, Kendall stared at it like it might be a mistake. The return address said Portland, Oregon. The handwriting was young, uncertain. Kendall's hands shook as she opened it. "Dear Mom, I know we have not spoken in years. I know you probably do not want to hear from me, and I understand if you do not write back. But I needed to tell you something, and I could not do it over the phone. I am in college now, University of Oregon. I am studying education. I want to be a teacher, but I know that probably sounds crazy given everything, but it is what I want to do. The problem was I could not afford it. Dad said he would help, but his business went under recently, and there just was not any money. I applied for every scholarship I could find, got rejected from most of them, but then I got a letter from something called the Eleanor Caldwell Scholarship Fund. It is for students who want to go into education, especially students from difficult circumstances. That is what they called it, difficult circumstances. Mom, they are paying for everything. Full tuition, books, housing, everything. Her entire college program completely covered. I cried when I got the letter. I thought it was a mistake. I looked up the scholarship online. It was founded some time ago by a woman named Eleanor Caldwell. She is a retired principal who wanted to help kids who could not afford college. The website has her picture. Mom, I know who she is. Kendall stopped reading, her vision blurred. She knew what was coming next, but she could not stop herself from continuing. I looked her up. I read about what happened, about what you did to her. I read the trial transcripts. I watched the body cam footage. It is all public record. I saw everything. I wanted to reject the scholarship. I wanted to send the money back and tell them I could not accept it. Not from her. But then I read her statement from the trial. Do you remember what she said? She said, "I taught children for a long time because I believe people can be better than their worst moments." I still believe that. She is paying for my education. Mom, the woman you arrested, the woman you hurt, is paying for me to become a teacher. She does not know I am your daughter. The scholarship is anonymous, based on merit and need. But I know, and now you know. I do not understand it. I do not understand how someone could be that kind after what you did to her. But I am taking the scholarship. I am going to become the kind of teacher she was, the kind who sees people, really sees them, the way you did not. I do not know if I will ever forgive you for what you did, but she apparently already has. I thought you should know that. Your daughter, Mia. Kendall read the letter multiple times. Her hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled. Other inmates were opening their mail around her, laughing at jokes or crying at bad news. But Kendall could not hear any of it. The world had narrowed to the words on the page. Eleanor Caldwell was paying for her daughter's education. The woman Kendall had handcuffed. The woman Kendall had mocked. The woman Kendall had processed as a Jane Doe and left in a cold room. That woman was giving Kendall's daughter the future Kendall had stolen from so many others. Kendall stood up on unsteady legs and walked back to her cell. She sat on her bunk, the letter clutched in her hands, and for the first time in years, she let herself really think about what she had done. She had seen an elderly black woman on a porch and decided she did not belong. She had not asked questions, had not verified anything. She had just decided based on nothing but the color of Eleanor's skin and her own prejudices that this woman was a criminal. And Eleanor had tried to tell her, had calmly explained who she was, had offered to show identification, and had done everything right. And Kendall had punished her for it. Kendall thought about all the others. Mr. Park standing outside his own business, Marcus Williams walking home from basketball practice, the grandmother in the park speaking Spanish to her grandchildren, all the people she had targeted because they were easy, because they were different, because she could. She had told herself she was doing her job. She had told herself she was keeping people safe. But the truth she had been running from for years, was simpler and uglier. She had been cruel because cruelty made her feel powerful. She had targeted the vulnerable because they could not fight back. And now the woman she had hurt most was saving her daughter. Kendall lay down on her bunk and stared at the ceiling. She thought about Eleanor Caldwell, elderly and sitting on her porch with a book and a cup of tea. She thought about the grace it must have taken to create a scholarship fund instead of drowning in bitterness. She thought about this kind of person who could be brutalized by the system and still believe in helping others. She thought about her daughter studying to become a teacher, learning from Eleanor's example instead of Kendall's. The tears came then hot and bitter and years too late. Kendall cried for those people she had hurt. She cried for the career she had destroyed. She cried for her daughter who was being raised by a stranger's kindness because her own mother had none to give. But mostly she cried because she finally understood. Eleanor Caldwell had won. Not by destroying Kendall. The system had done that. Not by seeking revenge. She had sought justice instead. She had won by being so thoroughly, completely good that even Kendall's own daughter would learn more from her example than from Kendall's blood. It was the most devastating victory Kendall could imagine. She kept the letter under her pillow, read it every night before sleep. Let it remind her of who she had been and who she had hurt and what real strength looked like. The years stretched ahead of her, years of invisible days and quiet nights, and the knowledge that somewhere out there her daughter was learning to be the kind of person Kendall had never been. It was not forgiveness. Kendall did not deserve forgiveness, but it was something, a small light in the darkness. Proof that even when people like Kendall broke the world, people like Eleanor Caldwell were out there putting it back together. One scholarship at a time, one life at a time. It was one act of grace that Kendall would spend the rest of her life trying to understand. In the end, this story leaves us with a profound and deeply moving lesson about the quiet, unbreakable power of grace. Eleanor Caldwell, an elderly woman who had every reason to let bitterness consume her after being humiliated and mistreated simply for sitting on her own porch, chose instead to rise above the cruelty she endured. Rather than allowing anger to harden her heart, she transformed her pain into something beautiful by creating a scholarship fund that would change young lives, including the daughter of the very officer who had caused her so much suffering. That single act of kindness reminds us that true strength is never loud or vengeful. It is found in the courage to forgive, in the choice to see the humanity in others even when they fail to see it in you, and in believing that people can be better than their worst moments. In a world that often rewards cruelty with more cruelty, Eleanor showed us that grace is the most powerful force of all. It does not erase the wrong done to us, but it refuses to let that wrong define who we become. Her example challenges every one of us to ask, when life hurts us deeply, will we let it make us smaller, or will we choose to become someone who lifts others up? It is a lesson that stays with you long after the story ends, touching the heart and stirring the soul. If this story of justice, redemption, and the healing power of grace moved you as much as it moved me, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Could you have shown the same forgiveness Eleanor did? Or do you believe Officer Reese's sentence should have been even harsher? Drop your honest opinion. I read every single comment. And if you want more powerful, emotional stories like this that remind us what really matters in life, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Let us keep spreading messages of hope, kindness, and real human strength together. Thank you for being here. Stay blessed.